So in this video, I'm doing Asta versus Ichigo isn't close debunk. Well, somewhat more so a review than a debunk. It's of course also by Broku. In this video, it's just going to be me pretty much discussing what I disagree with of the video, but I do agree with the outcome on who won. But without further ado, let's get straight to it. And also, I'm skipping the introduction part since the information should be stuff that you already know about these characters. So, and it's got nothing to do with the battle itself, so I'm just skipping those.
Question regarding this topic would be spirit energy or Raryoku versus anti-magic. How would they interact with each other? Would anti-magic be able to nullify spirit energy and the abilities made by it? Also, could Asta even see Ichigo? Because in Bleach, you could not see hollows or Shikigami unless if you have a certain level of spirit energy to be able to see them. Asta, though he does have a soul, he doesn't have spirit energy. He has anti-magic and he has ki, which is a composition of different life energies. But what we do know is that Asta can see souls. After the defeat of the Word Devil Zagrid, Asta did a conjoined effort with Licht and William to end the reincarnation magic happening across the Clover Kingdom. In doing so, it removes the elven souls from the human bodies. And when the souls leave the body, not only can Asta see the souls, but pretty much everybody there can as well. So, in Black Clover, anybody can see souls.
I'm probably just gonna speed this up a little bit.
This should in theory mean that if a Hollow or a Soul Reaper showed up in the Clover Kingdom, Asta would be able to see them. And if you want to say that, okay, well, he shouldn't be able to see them anyways, we do know that Hollows and Soul Reapers do affect the physical world that they are in. They do leave a presence behind, which is something that Asta could probably pick up on when using Ki. Ki is sensing the different life energies and how life energy is affected around him. He can even sense the...
Okay, it's starting to glitch, so I'll probably slow it down a bit. But just because you're like able to, well, just because a soul in Bleach is able to interact with the physical world doesn't mean that they're physically there for Asta to sense, per se. So he still wouldn't be able to like hear, see, well, he'll be able to see, but he won't be able to like hear or like uh sense their physical presence since they're not physically there. But he may be able to see them like, or like sense like the explosions that they can do. But I don't think that he will be able to like predict what souls like can do just because they can like blow shit up on the physical world, well, in the physical world. So I don't think he will actually be a factor in this battle. And now it's struggling. Okay, say less. Let's turn the quality down a little bit.
Ki of inanimate objects, things like falling boulders. Proof of this is Asta's little scuffle with Gildre, who made himself invisible and intangible, but Asta could still see him because of his ki. Also, Asta, with his eyes closed, was able to react to an attack from Gauche thanks to his ki. If Asta is in the general vicinity of Ichigo, he should be able to see him because he can see souls, and he should be able to see how the souls interact with the physical world. But just because Asta can see or even perceive Ichigo does not mean that he can actually interact with him or harm him. This is something that has enough substantiation in the manga that I would say actually, yeah, anti-magic could harm Ichigo. It can touch Ichigo. We don't know a lot about the soul in Black Clover. We just know that the soul is the source of life, mind, and magic. But the soul in of itself is not magic. But despite that, Asta is able to actually invade Patri's soul space, interact with Patri's soul physically, and bully him. This right here, this is Patri's soul, and Asta is doing this to him. Lucius also has soul powers, as he has access to soul magic, and Asta is able to nullify soul.
So the thing about that is that we don't know if Asta physically went into Patri's soul space, or if his consciousness went there. You know what I mean? It's kind of ambiguous on like what actually happened, but yeah, just because that scene happened doesn't mean that anti-magic can affect souls. We've never seen anti-magic, or it's never been implied that anti-magic is capable of affecting souls or having soul damage. Otherwise, Asta would be like durability negating everybody, because I don't think that anyone in Black Clover has shown any like soul defense. Maybe someone who has soul manipulation, like not Julius, Lucius, then sure, but someone that's like, I don't know, Mary Leona, you, it would be hard to prove that she has like some type of soul protection or something like that if Asta is able to like neg your durability and just hit your soul. So I don't really agree with the notion that he's going so far.
soul magic with his anti-magic, as Lucius tries to touch him and he cannot manipulate him, which both of these I think give a lot of credence to Asta's anti-magic, being able to know.
Well, the only reason why he cannot manipulate Asta is because he's using magic on someone who has anti magic. But that would be a different case if someone who uses soul manipulation that isn't magic based. So you can't really use that as like evidence.
Nullify spirit energy within Bleach if we are using verse equalization. We also know that forbidden magic curses affect the soul and actually reshape the body, the soul, magic, and even the physical.
Yeah, you would have to give us the verse equalization for him, well, for this battle, because if you don't, you would have to prove that he has soul damage, which is borderline impossible. Well, not impossible, but based on the evidence we have so far, it's unlikely that he does, or pretty much anyone besides maybe Lucius, who has soul damage. Well, not even Lucius, because he's only shown to manipulate the minds of people, and also like revive the dead. But so far, not even Julius is can be proven to have soul damage. So yeah, you need to use first equalization, which is actually kinda unfair, since you'll be granting someone an ability that they don't have canonically. So yeah, damn.
Physical world, and Asta can still resist or even outright nullify these curses. Inverse equalization, Ryoku and magic power would likely be equated. If you disagree with this, that's fine, I will touch on that later, because at the very least, even without verse equalization, Asta's powers would be able to work on Ichigo and harm him. Anti-magic could actually touch Ichigo, it just might not have the property to nullify it if you're not using verse equalization. Because don't forget that Asta's ability isn't just anti-magic, the anti-magic is its own form of energy that acts as a power that makes him stronger and faster. He still produces incredibly powerful physical forces. It's actually stated in the very beginning of the series that anti-magic only nullifies the spell, but not the physical force that spell produces. That means that any spell that Asta outright negates and completely nullifies, Asta actually has to scale to it, at least in a large way. I made a whole video on the subject here. So what that means is that Asta still needs to pack a punch, and definitely needs to be fast enough to go against Ichigo. Also, we got two.
I don't know about that. I would say you would have to like prove that the kinetic energy is equal to the magic that is, or more so the mana that is fueling the magic attack. Because if you like, example, if you're able to like neg kinetic energy, then they should be like no AP. There should be like no AP, and yeah, but yeah, I don't 100% really agree with it, but it's whatever.
Two swordsmen here, that is probably going to play a factor. Who's the better swordsman? So we'll be talking about that as well. But first, I'm going to talk about the power scaling and the attack potency. And of course, I'm going to be using current Asta again. At the time I'm writing the script, there have only been 373 chapters of Black Clover. So if Asta gets any more crazy...
In terms of like the better swordsman, I would probably say Asta is a better swordsman than Ichigo. Not saying that Ichigo isn't skilled. Ich- Ichigo's more like, I understand that Ichigo actually. I'll talk about that in that portion of the video somewhere around here. Yeah.
crazy feats after this. Sorry, I don't have future sight, at least not all the time. But that doesn't mean that as of right now, Asta is not incredibly powerful. He is, in my opinion, one of the most underrated characters in Battle Shonen when it comes to power. I'm gonna nip that in the butt right now. I'm
Mhm.
gonna give a bit of a warning here for both Asta and Ichigo. I'm gonna delve into their higher interpretations of power. The reason for that is that it's going to be a lot quicker to discuss. We don't have to use multiple calculations or stack a bunch of chain scaling to calculate who is stronger. Whether you lowball them both or highball them both, it doesn't change the outcome really. So I'm not going to go over every single point for Asta's
Facts.
attack potency. You can check out this video if you want a more in-depth discussion, but I'll still cover a fair amount here. But anyways, Dorothy can create an infinite space with her glamour world. This has happened multiple times throughout the series, making it consistent. She fights a copy of herself, and that fight actually destroys the realm they are in, which would mean that they are relative in power to their infinite-sized space they create. There are implications of other characters that scale above Glamour World too, and some are strong enough to destroy the realm. Yami destroys Glamour World with his Dimension/Equinox, which is a mixture of both attack potency and hacks. Remember, yes, the hacks part is him cutting the world in half, but the actual attack potency part, the force part, is that he has enough force with his slash to cause the split universe to crumble and collapse. Think of it like if you're cutting
Actually, wait.
a pizza. If you cut a pizza with a pizza cutter layered in spatial magic, sure, it's going to cut through it like butter, but if you slam that pizza cutter down hard enough, the pizza will explode and go everywhere. Anyways, Yami says that Death Thrust is actually
Um. So first off, I actually made a video like debunking the whole high universal stuff because I just don't really. I don't think the arguments for it is that good. Um. Sure, you can argue it, but it's not that good. I view it as wank than a highball. I would say like a highball. I don't really think they really have a highball. Actually, I would say like a highball is probably just like baseline universal. Yeah, you can interpret some things as like just universal with like world statements and stuff. I would say that's more so a highball, but like a high universal and 4D, I just view those as like wank for Black Clover. But anywho, I do want to point out, uh, with the whole dimension slash thing and like the pizza thing, the problem with that, with the whole pizza analogy, is that it's a false equivalence, right? Trying to compare slicing a pizza in half, or any physical object that exists within space, cutting that isn't the same as cutting the space itself. Spatial destruction, or like spatial like cutting has no AP, right? If like it's whenever in fiction, whenever they like the animators depict space getting cut or destroyed, they're always depicted as like how would I explain it, like shattered glass, but it's like space instead. Like the background looks like just shattered glass, but you know like how Broly and Gogeta like destroyed reality. Well, actually, that's a bit different. That's kind of not the same. But yeah, but you guys know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So like the whole dimension slash, it doesn't have AP. Um, yeah, and comparing matter to space is disanalogous, so that argument can't be used. Um, and what does it say? Well, wait, if I cut him, he just regenerates. There's no point. I'll have to be. It'll have to be something faster, tougher. I've already went over this in my uh, Black Clover isn't Universal video, so check that out.
Actually more powerful than his Dimension Slash, and it's a spell he absolutely needed against Dante. And Asta scales well above Death Thrust, as Death Thrust only works on 80% Dante, and there's just so many ways to scale Asta well above that. And as I said earlier,
We could probably like skip all of this stuff. Actually, no.
there are a plethora of statements of characters scaling directly above the glamour world. For example, Dorothy even thinks that in the middle of the time skip, her dimension would not be powerful enough to contain the devil, and that it would just destroy it if she tried. The Dark Triad, who each were possessed by devils, all ended up being far stronger than what the Heart Queen and the Water Spirit had expected the devil to send Dante, and only got far spaces. That qualifies for high universal power. There's even more support for it.
This is stuff that, well, the majority of the stuff is things I've already went over in my video that talks about them not being universal, so let's go back a bit. So we'll just ignore it. But yeah, I will agree, just for the video, that Asta is high universal, or maybe 100 times high universal, however many you want to stack it. It's still not going to change anything.
Lucius, who is stronger than Lucifero, making the universal Asta arguments even more consistent. But when it comes to Ichigo's attack power, it's pretty consistent that the three major realms in Bleach, the Living World, the Soul Society, and Wakamundo, are all universes. As we know, the Living World in Bleach is just our universe in modern day, and Wakamundo and Soul Society are realms relatively the same size. We see Squad Zero.
Okay, this is the part where I need to slow things down.
Are so strong, they cannot use their Bankai, or they could destroy all three of the realms. In fact, several of these Squad Zero members have to kill themselves so that one of them can actually use their suppressed Bankai. And just by activating their suppressed Bankai, they are still violently shaking all three of these universal realms, which makes it consistent that Squad Zero could destroy multiple universes. Ichigo scales above Squad Zero by the end of the series. On top of this, the Soul King and his divine power turned the original, singular, supersized universe into three separate universes. This is a major plot point, and Yhwach is actually stated to be doing the opposite, where he would turn these three universes back into one. Ichigo can damage Reo, the Soul King, and can damage Yhwach even after he absorbed the Soul King. He just blatantly scales to Yhwach. It was more so Yhwach's hacks that were an issue for Ichigo. But again, Yhwach planned to merge the three universes together, and while a lot of people complain about Bleach cosmology and say that it can't be low,
it's also the Dangai and also the Garganta, which contains the Bleach cosmology that the Soul King Yhwach was, or is it Yhwach? Whichever way you pronounce his name, he was going to destroy the Garganta, the cosmology, everything. It wasn't just going to be the three worlds, as I think I have that scan. Actually, I'm not gonna post the scan up. I'll post the scan up when I make How Strong is Bleach. But yeah, this is a somewhat good depiction of the cosmology. You have the three worlds, the Precipice world, which is the Donga, which connects these two. The Soul Society and Human world. You have like multiple Valley of Screams around the Dongai. The Precipice world is the Dongai, for those of you that don't know. And then you have the Garganta, which contains all of these universes. And the Hullverse, or Hull, is stated to be a multiverse, which I'll get into all of that in my How Strong is Bleach video. But he wasn't just threatening the three worlds.
multiversal because they're just three fractions of one universe. But again, the living world is our universe. That is a universe, and it's three universes, one being our size.
You can actually argue for multiversal plus, as you can make arguments for some of the universes being infinite due to like statements in the novels and other arguments you can use from the manga. But yeah,
combined together. That's low multiversal. It's also stated on numerous occasions that Ichigo would be an ideal replacement for the Soul King, which would mean that he would have to have that power naturally as well. While attack power is incredibly important, Perfect Cell taught all of us that it is not really going to matter.
Oh yeah, and also I've just remembered. Um, you could make an argument for like what's his face Mugetsu Ichigo being that strong because in one of the data books it was stated that Mugetsu transcended everything. Uh, so you could say, well, okay, he's above the cosmology, and like, boom, and then like War Arc Ichigo is like many orders of magnitude above that version because he can stack his holification powers on top of that and his real Soul Reaper powers and his Quincy powers. Like, example, true Bankai Ichigo with Horn of Salvation is about 1,000 times amp because the hollow powers is shown to give you a 10 times increase. It's similar, well, it's equivalent or sometimes stronger than the Bankai increase, as characters that are like captains and other characters that have Bankai and Hollow Mask or like Holification, they always use Holification instead of Bankai. And like one of the captains like talked shit about the Bankai increase, so yeah, Holification bare minimum 10 times, then you can slap the Bankai on top of that, which is 1,000 times. And we also know that not Quincy, that Ichigo's Quincy powers is also like equivalent to a Bankai increase because most of his story, in most of the Bleach story, he's just been using his Quincy powers instead of his Soul Reaper powers. So it's another Bankai level increase. Boom, 1,000 times. And his adult version, well, in the whole arc, one shot, you could even argue that Shika Ichigo is on the level of his War Arc Bankai self, since his Shikai seemingly just has his like fused Zanpakuto, which was his Bankai in the War Arc. So yeah, you can make a lot of arguments.
If you cannot actually land that bevy of power on your opponent. Poor future Trunks. Bleach has impressive speed metrics, with certain abilities like Sero stated to be light, and even many different calculations getting characters to faster than light or even massively faster than light without the use of Seros. If Seros are granted the speed of light, then Bleach gets thousands of times the speed of light pretty early in the series, and don't forget the confirmed speed multipliers that exist like Bankais or Shikais. Though there are some issues with Seros being light speed. For one, while they are confirmed to be light, there are many light-based abilities in fiction that are not light speed. And if we're going to be fair, well, Gauche has mirror magic, which is confirmed to use reflected light as his attacks. This would make Gauche, even as a young child, well before the beginning of the series, being light speed, which would...
Okay, well, the difference with that is that Gauche's light is shown to be not light speed. Well, it's proven to be not light speed. You can prove that Gauche's light is not light speed. But for like Zeros, you can't really make that assumption. Just because it could be slower than light, you would have to prove that it is slower than light for your assumption to like be valid. Otherwise, you just go with the bare minimum of it just being light speed. Um, yeah, if something is light based, you usually just assume it's light speed for the most part, and it's also called a beam of light. Well, the Negation light from Ceros is also called a beam of light and like spiritual light as well. And the characters such as like Yamamoto calls the that light as light, and if it's spiritual light, then it will be equivalent to the light that comes from the sun in the Soul Society, because everything in the Soul Society is just spiritual particles. It was just spiritual based. It's just all reishi. So if there's no difference between them, then it's most likely just light speed, and there's no contradictions to that. But unlike Osha's light,
would significantly upscale the speed of Black Clover just as it would for Bleach, making Asta many times the speed of light in Chapter 1. But when it comes to consistency, light speed and even faster than light becomes consistent in Black Clover just 50 chapters in, as we have light magic that is outright stated to be light speed, not once, not twice, not thrice, but 4 times. It's
yeah, this is like the evidence I would use to disprove Gosha's light, to show that the possibility in Black Clover that light attacks can be slower than light speed. But you can't do that for like Bleach and many other series. If you just say, well, it's possible that the light is in light speed, well, you would have to prove that it's possible. Otherwise, you're just appealing to possibility if you can't prove it.
It's also stated that an increase in magic power leads to higher speeds for these light users. And with this, we have some crazy calculations. Mereoleona whoops Raya, and Raya was far faster than Patri. Yet Asta blitzes her magic from the end of this room, putting Chapter 146 Asta's base speed at 188 times the speed of light. In the current final saga, Jack the Ripper did a slash that traveled so far that we can see the slash on the Noble Realm from the curvature of the Earth. So Jack's slash traveled hundreds of kilometers in the same time frame that it took Morgan's light to move just 80 meters. That's over 5,000 times the speed of light, and I've seen calculations of this that get it to over 15,000 times the speed of light.
I've refuted this in my Slow Clover video, but hang on, let's see if I can show it.
From the curvature of the Earth. So
Damn, I can't really show it. It doesn't actually show the curve, but essentially, what's it? The people that like try to get the slash like extremely far, far, extremely far, um, they use the curvature of the Earth, and for some reason, they just don't understand the difference of like perspective. Like, obviously, if something's closer to you, it's going to appear bigger. But if you like take, you see this line right here, this slash, if you were to take that slash and move it all the way to where the curve is, it would be like absolutely tiny. Unless you think this slash is like 400 kilometers and you think this mountain is 400 kilometers in diameter, I prove that such a mountain, if it was 400 kilometers in diameter, it would be like 65 kilometers like high, bare minimum. So it's this calc is kind of wonky, but I've seen more accurate calcs just putting it in like 100 and something times.
Jack's slash traveled hundreds of kilometers in the same time frame that it took Morgan.
It would actually be nice if he showed the entire like calc, because I want to see what they did to like get that far, or whoever calculated this.
like to move just 80 meters. That's over 5,000 times the speed of light, and I've seen calculations of this that get it to over 15,000 times the speed of light. Morgan barely dodged this attack, and the Lucius clones should be at least close to the speed of the Paladins, like Morgan. And Asta in his base form can keep up with their speed, making current base Asta easily many thousands of times the speed of light. And that's leaving out many multipliers and chain scaling that can get it much higher. I've gotten it to billions or even trillions of times the speed of light in previous videos. You can argue that both.
To be fair, if you want to go with like the Kulks, right? Um, do you know how fast you have to be, or your energy has to be, in order to travel to different universes in like instantly, like a few seconds? Like, because like Senjumaru's like spiritual energy has to travel outside of the Soul Society, the universe, past the Precipice World, the Dangai, which is a separate space-time continuum, which is universal in size, because it's called a world. And last I checked, a world isn't a space-time. So it's bare minimum a universe. And then it has to travel past that into the mortal universe, or the world of the living, all the way to the main world, and then shake that world. And then it also has to travel all the way to Heika Mundo, which is another universe. So if you want to go with like Hulks, I don't know how, like, it would be in the trillions or probably septillions of times like faster than light, if you want to like try Hulk that. If you want to just say bare minimum the size of the observable universe. And then like you also have like Yuabaha's spiritual pressure going to destroy the three realms, and it has to travel all the way there. So yeah, in terms of speed, Ichigo should be able to like body Asta in terms of like speed. And also we've seen like Orihime react to the Soul King Yuabaha's or Yuabak, whichever way you want to pronounce it, spiritual pressure, and also Ichigo as well in just his Shikai. So, and then he can like get 1,000 times faster on top of that. So yeah, Ichigo should be able to perception blitz the entire Black Cloververse in base.
Both Ichigo and Asta have infinite speed, as Ichigo would have to have speed scaling comparable to characters who can create or destroy multiple universes in finite time, and Asta scales well above Dorothy, who dodged Yame's Dimension Slash that destroyed the Glamour World universe in finite time as well. And while destroying 3 universes in finite time is significantly more impressive than just one, the Black Clover feat takes place way earlier in the series than Bleach's, which should offset that balance. So if you lowball both speeds, then Black Clover is much faster. If you highball both speeds, Black Clover is still faster, but not by as much. On the other hand, Bleach is much stronger. High Universal is impressive, but it does not compare to being able to destroy multiple universes. One thing
I already refuted the whole infinite speed argument for Black Clover. The infinite speed argument for Ichigo, uh, although you could make it, it's just inconsistent. So I just don't use it.
thing I want to add is that it does seem that a lot of people do not like the universal metas for either Black Clover or Bleach, but as I said, it doesn't really matter either way. If you lowball Black Clover, it's planetary for all the destroy the world statements that are paired with actually calculated feats, like this small planetary calculation from Lumiere.
Also, the like Ichigo being like low multi or multiversal, that's like mid balling. That's not a high ball. High ball is like, what is a high ball? I would say like high ball is like outer versal Bleach, which is more so wank. It's a highball wank. No, actually, wank is universal bleach. Highball is like higher dimensional arguments with like the ice and stuff, like 60 or some shit. That's a highball.
where he splits a planet-sized cloud in 7 seconds. Whereas the realms of Bleach would still be at least multi-solar system and a low-end meta for Bleach, which would still
Oh yeah, the whole world thing. Like, hang on.
or
Let's go
Bleach.
back a little bit.
But, as I said, it doesn't really matter either way. If you lowball Black Clover, it's planetary for all of the destroy the world statements that are paired with actually calculated feats, like this small planetary calculation from Lumiere, where he splits a planet-sized cloud in 7.
The mage's light shone over so brightly upon the whole world. Yeah, the whole world doesn't necessarily mean the planet. It could just mean the society, right? The society in the Clover Kingdom, that can mean world. It doesn't necessarily have to mean the planet. So I don't agree with this calculation unless you can like prove that they are referring to the planet instead of like society, then say less. I agree.
7 seconds. Whereas the realms of Bleach would still be at least multi-solar system and a low-end meta for Bleach, which would still put Bleach at way stronger than Black Clover. So if we give Asta a massive speed advantage, but give Ichigo the massive power advantage, who wins? Well, there are still other key factors that come into play. One of them is stamina, because if Asta has to consistently outspeed Ichigo to dodge his attacks, that means he'll be draining more power at a quicker rate. And while Asta does have superhuman levels of stamina, it is nowhere near the level of Ichigo, who's able to fight Zangetsu within the Dongai for 3 months straight. Another huge factor they hinted at earlier was who is the better fighter, who is the better swordsman. Contrary to popular belief, Asta is not just some buff dude with a power nullification sword that just throws it around mindlessly. Asta is a really good swordsman. Asta actually trained in swordsmanship from a very young age, though much of it was self-taught, as when he was a little boy he emulated sword fighting by using a stick. But shortly after he received his 5-leaf Clover Grimoire and his first anti-magic sword, he began training with Fonzel, who was a mage that used swords, and he was actually a former commander of the Diamond Kingdom military. He was actually the one in charge of instructing soldiers in the kingdom for sword skills. Despite teaching well over 100 soldiers, his thoughts on Asta was that he was already the second best out of all the people he's ever trained. This scene is from an anime episode which faithfully adapts one of the canon light novels. But keep in mind, this statement from Fonzel takes place between chapters 1 and 2 of the manga, meaning that Asta is already a skilled swordsman before he even joins the Magic Knights. But he continues to meet multiple swordsmen throughout the series and learn from them. He learned from Kyoto, the dancing swordsman, and copied his dancing sword technique with its primary function, making it incredibly hard for the opponent to sense you, even with Ki. As Asta, who had Ki sensing, could not sense Kyoto when he was using his dancing sword. This dancing sword technique also deflects damage, so that if you were to take a hit while you're doing your dancing technique, you actually don't take the full brunt of the blow. Asta would learn this technique in like 1 page after watching Kyoto do it. He also learned from Licht, who was a sword mage and considered a master swordsman, and he learned by both fighting him and watching him. Obviously, Asta has learned a considerable amount from Yami, who was a prodigy in the Land of the Sun, is actually even comparable to people who were thought to be strong enough to become the Shogun, which is the Wizard Queen equivalent. The Land of the Sun is basically Japan, and Yami shows multiple EI abilities, which imply that he was trained in the martial art of Ido, or Aijutsu, and has only continued to develop his swordsmanship skills in the many years after he went to the Clover Kingdom. On top of this, Asta actually went to the Land of the Sun and trained with a bunch of swordsmen who would spend their entire lives training by the blade. Even though Asta is statistically equal to Ichika, at some point, his swordsmanship skill is at least on par with her, showing that he is not just overpowering her, he actually is a good swordsman. Ichigo's own sword skills are nothing to scoff at, as he immediately holds his own and learns from swordsmen who've been training for hundreds or even thousands of years. Ichigo is immediately able to hold his own against Kenpachi, who has fought people who know over 8,000 sword styles. While it can be argued that in reality, a bunch of master swordsmen not being able to significantly outclass a noob like Ichigo means their sword skill is overrated, the same argument could be made for the Land of the Sun. Are they really spending all their time training if Asta is already as good as them? So I think it's just more logically sound to assume that Ichigo really is that good with the blade, and so are the people of the Soul Society, and so is Asta. But if we're being real, Ichigo is likely much more skilled with swordsmanship and can also dual wield just like Asta. There are more abilities to these characters. Ichigo and Asta both get incredibly strong, incredibly fast, even in the middle of fights. So they both have the ability to grow in power and skill. I'd be here all day if I went over every little ability they had. So going into the fight, there is actually one very
Yeah, I would still give it to Asta since since he actually shown sword like techniques, whereas Ichigo he's just fought characters that are like have like high experience with like the sword. They have like sword techniques, I guess. But I don't think you can like find I don't think you can actually find like a Bleach character using like a sword technique that's like in our world, I guess, like Yami, like what he showed with like Yami using like a sword technique from like Japan. You I know about like Unohana's like, oh, she has like 1,000 styles, but like that version of Kenpachi that fought that version of Unohana, it wasn't that Kenpachi was like skilled with the sword. He was just using more of his like sealed power to just make the sword techniques just useless. Um, and that was like War Arc Kenpachi. That isn't Soul Society Arc Kenpachi, which was the only time Ichigo fights Kenpachi. And the other times that Ichigo like fights other characters, you can just easily just say he's just swinging his sword. He's just trying to hit his target. He's just swinging his sword, and he's able to land hits because he's that fast, that powerful, not because of like fancy techniques. So yeah, I would still give it to Asta in terms of sword techniques.
Very important question that decides if this is even a fight at all. That is spirit pressure, or Reiatsu. Spirit pressure is the force of one's Reiryoku, and it can be used to significantly weaken or even outright nullify the abilities of opponents if it's used on a far weaker one. As I said, Ichigo is far stronger than Asta, but here's the thing. Asta is incredibly resistant to power nullification. An example of this is his battle against Lucius. These time orbs have the ability to shut off your magic power, which is power nullification, yet it didn't do.
The only thing is that all the power nullification stuff that is like uh that you're going to bring up is all magic based. The very same thing that Asta's anti magic negates. Right? So those types of like arguments isn't necessarily going to work for like, let's say, power nullification that isn't magic based. You wouldn't be able to prove that Asta would just be able to ignore that.
Anything to Asta's anti-magic while inside of it, allowing him to move freely. Not only that, but Lucius was far stronger than this.
Oh yeah, and also, since like the way Bleach characters can like power null things is via just their spiritual pressure, Asta's going to get negged. Like Asta's anti magic is not going to work on Ichigo at all, especially with like the power difference. Like Ichigo is like multiple, like not multiple, like he's infinitely stronger than like Asta, quite literally, infinitely. High universal and low multiversal, the gap is just that great.
Version of Asta, as Asta would need to transform to his partial union, which is far more powerful than his full black form or his base, just to essentially stalemate Lucius. And this is a potent power nullification by Lucius. So while in a state far weaker than another character, he resists layered power nullification like it was nothing. It's one of those things where if this were a magic user instead from Black Clover, they are far more likely to fall victim to the nullification of Reiatsu. So now that the battle can commence, what happens? Well, Ichigo has some massive advantages. He has much more power, he has more sword skill, and he has a big stamina advantage, while Asta's only real advantage is speed and power nullification. In my opinion, this is a battle of adaptation. Asta adapting to Ichigo's superior sword skill and power, learning from him and growing stronger as the battle rages on. At the same time, Ichigo will do his own adaptation, adapting to Asta's speed and growing faster himself. But Ichigo has the overall advantage, and it's probably not even close. The power gap he holds is wider than the speed gap in Asta's side. In short, Ichigo will overcome the speed gap before Asta does the power differential, and Asta is far more likely to tire out before Ichigo. So in my opinion,
What's Asta gonna do if he like just flexes and like the world just gets obliterated on accident, depending on like where they're fighting? Uh, yeah, Ichigo's range, like DC range, that he would naturally have, he would literally obliterate Asta from like across the continent.
And Ichigo is going to win almost every time if these two were to fight in 100 simulations. He can win by catching Asta slacking, ending the battle in one blow, or play the long game, adapting to Asta until he can land a killing blow. Asta's only real strategy is playing to aggressive.
Oh yeah, and I think Broku forgot to mention about like Ichigo's abilities such as Blue Vein, which unironically is stated to give you a 10 times amp. Well, it's a Bankai level increase, so it's a 10 times, right? And Blue Vein amps your durability, and like there's another Blue ability for Quincy's that amps your attacks by another 10 times. So, yeah, Ichigo has that, and then he also has like Flash Step, which is pretty much like teleportation. But yeah, he does have quite a bit of abilities, and since he's like a Quincy, he could also like soul destruct. Uh, he could also like destroy Asta's soul, which that's why the Soul Reapers had to get rid of the Quincy's. And what other abilities does this guy have? Um, yeah, that's all I can think of, like off the top of the domer. But yeah, he does have more abilities that Broku didn't mention.
Aggression, and immediately playing the strategy of weakening Ichigo. Asta has 3 plus abilities that weaken his opponents. The Demon Dweller Sword can absorb energy, Causality Break can shut off an opponent's power temporarily, and with Zetten, Asta can increase his power 20-fold, and then attack someone's magic power directly. Asta would need to immediately activate Causality Break and separate Ichigo from his Ryoku. Though because of the power gap, it would probably only separate some of Ichigo's Ryoku. At the same time, Asta...
It wouldn't separate his if we equalizing energy, he wouldn't be able to separate Ichigo's magic or spirit energy at all because of the difference in power. Like you would have to prove that causality break or any of his anti magic can affect someone of that caliber, which we have seen Asta's causality or demon destroyer sword not being able to sever Lolo's I don't know how to pronounce her name, Lolo Pachico or something like that, the Heart Queen's like curse with his sword. Like he was able to like stop a explosion curse, but like not the curse that turned her into a devil, or the curse that was going to like take her life over time. So there is limits to what that sword can do, and since Asta is only like in the universal range, whereas Ichigo is in the multiversal range, it's impossible to say that any of Asta's abilities will work on Ichigo.
Asta would need to spam Zetten after Zetten to continuously attack Ichigo's power directly, weakening him with each slash. At the same time, Asta would need to occasionally sap energy from Ichigo with the Demon Dweller Sword. But this is like a once in 1,000 times chance to happen, maybe more, maybe less. Asta would need to achieve all 3 of these things as part of his strategy perfectly. And even if he did, I still don't know if it's enough, because I don't know if his stamina can outlast Ichigo's stamina, and if he can nullify Ichigo's power fast enough to make him stronger than him. So in the vast majority of scenarios, Ichigo wins, and in most of those victories, it's not even close. With that being said, let me know your thoughts down below. How do you think the battle of Asta versus Ichigo goes? Thank you so much.
But yeah, I do agree with the outcome that Ichigo wins, but it was just some things that I disagreed with this video. Does he say anything
To
else
support
of
everybody.
significance?
This is like one of my first Bleach videos. My plan is to do more Bleach videos in the future because it's become one of my favorite series of all time.
Okay, never mind. Nothing adding to the battle. But yeah, tell me what you guys think of this matchup. Personally, I think like maybe like Soul Society Ichigo or the whole verse movie Ichigo like bodies Asta. End of Soul Society Ichigo. I'm talking about, not beginning of Soul Society, but like end of Soul Society, because like you can also make the universal arguments for that Ichigo in just Shikai. And then you can like get 10 times stronger, so on and so forth. But the other problem would like be speed. Well, actually, not even just universal. You can make other higher arguments for it, but yeah, I just view those arguments as like wank. Anyways, that's it for this video, and until next time, peace off. Peace off. Bro, my English is just fading away. Peace.